Crash landing. Marcus Stone had survived 3 interstellar wars, 2 failed expeditions, and 1 catastrophic marriage. But as his scout ship plummeted through the amber atmosphere of Navarra, trailing fire and debris, he wondered if his legendary luck had finally run out. Mayday, Mayday. This is Scout Ship Hermes requesting immediate assistance. Marcus shouted into the comm system, fighting the violently shaking controls. Coordinates unknown. Systems failing. Only static answered his call as the ship's hull screamed in protest. The navigation panel exploded in a shower of sparks, narrowly missing his face. Through the viewport, the ground rushed up to meet him, a vast landscape of crimson plains and towering violet mountains. "Come on, you piece of junk," Marcus growled, yanking the emergency landing thrusters. They sputtered to life just seconds before impact, converting what would have been a fatal crash into merely a catastrophic one. The world went black. Marcus awoke to the acrid smell of burning circuitry. Blood trickled down his forehead, and pain radiated from his left shoulder. Outside the cracked viewport, twin suns blazed in an alien sky. The ship's systems were dead, the distress beacon silent. "Perfect," he muttered, pulling himself from the pilot's chair. A quick inventory revealed his situation. Minimal supplies, his multi-tool, a portable scanner, and his sidearm with half a charge. The ship's emergency kit provided basic medical supplies, which he used to patch his wounds. According to his briefing, Navarra was classified as a non-intervention world, home to a pre-spaceflight civilization the Galactic Alliance was observing but not contacting. Now he'd violated that directive in the most spectacular way possible. The scout ship's hull had been breached in multiple places, and the life support systems were beyond repair. Marcus needed to find water and shelter before night fell. His scanner indicated a water source 5 kilometers east, so he gathered what supplies he could salvage and set out across the crimson plains. The alien landscape was both beautiful and forbidding. Swaying purple vegetation created a sea of movement across the plains, while crystal formations caught the light of the twin suns, casting rainbow patterns across the ground. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth standard, which helped as Marcus trudged east, his shoulder throbbing with each step. 3 hours into his journey, the scanner alerted him to movement, large life forms approaching rapidly from the north. Marcus ducked behind a cluster of crystalline formations, drawing his sidearm. Through the transparent crystals, he saw them. Humanoid figures riding atop 6-legged beasts that moved with unsettling grace across the plains. The riders were tall and slender, with skin the color of burnished copper. Their faces were marked with intricate patterns, and they wore armor crafted from materials he couldn't identify. Each carried what appeared to be a ceremonial spear, though Marcus knew better than to assume anything about alien technology was purely ceremonial. He held his position, hoping they would pass without noticing him. But his luck had indeed run out. One of the riders, distinguishable by an elaborate headdress, suddenly pulled up short, head tilted as if sensing something. A sharp command sent 2 others circling toward Marcus's hiding place. "So much for non-intervention," Marcus muttered, weighing his options. Running would only provoke them. Fighting was out of the question. Even if his sidearm was fully charged, he wouldn't risk harming the natives. That left diplomacy, always his weakest skill. He stood slowly, hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Hello there. Sorry about dropping in unannounced." The reaction was immediate. The riders circled him, spears leveled at his chest, communicating in rapid clicks and whistles. The leader approached, dismounting with fluid grace. Now that they were closer, Marcus could see that what he had taken for decorative patterns were actually fine scales that caught the light as they moved. The leader was female, her copper skin darker than the others, with scales that shifted from amber to deep red. Her eyes were the most alien feature, entirely black with no visible pupils, yet somehow conveying intense scrutiny as she circled him. Marcus kept his hands visible, forcing a smile. "My name is Marcus Stone. My ship crashed. I mean no harm." The female leader stopped directly in front of him, her head tilting in what might have been curiosity or contempt. She spoke again, the clicks and whistles forming a pattern that his universal translator couldn't decipher. When he didn't respond, she jabbed her spear toward him, the point stopping centimeters from his chest. "I don't understand," Marcus said, keeping his voice level despite his racing heart. "I'm just looking for water and shelter until my people can find me." The leader barked an order, and the circle of riders tightened around him. One approached with what looked like restraints. Marcus tensed. Being taken prisoner on an uncontacted world was a complication he didn't need. "Look, I appreciate the welcome wagon, but I'll just be on my way," he said, taking a step back. The leader's posture changed instantly, her body coiling like a spring. Before Marcus could react, she had leveled her spear at him. Time seemed to slow as she launched the weapon with impossible speed. Marcus saw the spear spinning toward his chest, its tip glinting in the alien sunlight. Years of combat training took over, his body reacting on pure instinct. His hands shot out, and against all probability, they closed around the shaft of the spear mere inches from his heart. The impact sent pain shooting through his injured shoulder, but he maintained his grip, staggering back a step but remaining upright, the spear clutched firmly in his hands. Silence fell over the plains. The riders had gone completely still, their mounts shifting nervously beneath them. The leader stood frozen, her expressionless face finally showing an emotion Marcus could recognize: shock. She approached slowly, her gaze fixed on the spear in his hands. When she stood before him, she dropped to one knee and pressed her fist against her chest, speaking the single word that needed no translation: Khazar. The other riders followed suit, dismounting and kneeling before him. Marcus looked from the kneeling aliens to the spear in his hands, certain he had stumbled into something far more complicated than a simple first contact. The leader rose and approached him, placing a hand on her chest. "Kira," she said clearly. "Marcus," he replied, pointing to himself. Kira reached for the spear. Marcus gladly handed it back, relieved to be rid of the weapon, but she immediately pressed it into his hands again, speaking rapidly and pointing to him, then to herself, then making a binding gesture with her hands. One of the riders approached with a small device that they attached to Kira's throat. When she spoke again, her clicks and whistles were accompanied by broken, accented English. "You caught my spear. By the ancient law of Navarra, we are now bound. Your fate is my fate." Her expression made it clear this was not a welcome development. The Khazar bond is sacred and unbreakable. Marcus blinked, the spear suddenly feeling very heavy in his hands. "I'm sorry, what?" "You are now Khazar bound to me. Until death." Kira's black eyes narrowed. "This has not happened in 7 generations. Look, I appreciate the honor," Marcus said carefully, "but I'm just trying to survive until my people can find me. I don't want to disrespect your customs, but surely there's some kind of exception for aliens who don't know the rules." Kira's expression hardened. "There are no exceptions to Khazar. The challenge was given. The spear was caught. The bond is made." She gestured to the other riders, who were watching the exchange with evident fascination. "My hunting party will escort us back to the settlement. The elders must be informed." As they prepared to depart, mounting the 6-legged beasts, Marcus found himself sharing Kira's mount, the spear still clutched awkwardly in his hands. He had come to Navarra to perform a routine survey mission. Now he was bound by an alien law to a warrior who seemed as unhappy about the arrangement as he was. "Just to be clear," he said as they set off across the Crimson Plains, "what exactly does this bond entail?" Kira's response was curt. "We are now one in the eyes of the tribe. Your enemies are my enemies. Your honor is my honor. Your shame is my shame." She paused, then added with evident distaste, "We are meant to fight as one, hunt as one, and if the gods will it, die as one. So, we're married?" Marcus asked, immediately regretting the question. Kira made a sound that might have been a scoff. Your human concepts are inadequate. Khazard is deeper than your marriage. It is a soul binding. The legends say those who are Khazar-bound begin to share thoughts, feelings, even dreams. Fantastic, Marcus muttered as the hunting party picked up speed, racing toward the distant mountains. The crashed scout ship receded behind them, along with any hope of a simple rescue. Somehow, in trying to avoid cultural contamination, he had managed to become spiritually married to an alien warrior. His superiors at the Galactic Alliance would never let him hear the end of this, assuming he lived long enough to report back. As they rode, Marcus couldn't help noticing that something was tracking them from the crystal formations to the south, something large that moved just at the edge of visibility. When he pointed it out, Kira's posture stiffened. "Morvac," she said, her voice suddenly tense. "Your skyship has awakened them. They have been sleeping for generations." She urged their mount to greater speed. "We must reach the settlement before nightfall." "What exactly is a Morvac?" Marcus asked, glancing nervously at the distant movement. "Death," Kira replied simply. "And they are hunting us." Reluctant alliance. The Neverend settlement sprawled across a valley nestled between two violet mountains. Unlike the primitive dwellings Marcus had expected, the structures were complex, part organic, part crystalline, merging seamlessly with the natural formations of the landscape. Bridges of braided material connected elevated platforms, while luminescent plants provided natural lighting as the twin suns began to set. Kira's hunting party was met at the settlement's edge by a delegation of elders, their copper skin darker than the warriors, their scaled patterns more elaborate. The news of the Khazar bond spread quickly, and soon Marcus found himself surrounded by curious Neverends, some touching his pale skin or strange clothing with wonder or suspicion. The elders led them to a central platform where what appeared to be the entire settlement had gathered. Kira stood beside Marcus, rigid and formal, as she explained the circumstances of their bond in the Neverend language. The spear, now recognized by Marcus as a symbol of profound importance, was placed ceremonially between them. An elder with scales that had faded to a pale amber addressed Marcus through one of the translation devices. "Outsider, do you understand what has happened this day?" "I'm beginning to," Marcus replied carefully. "But in my defense, I was just trying not to get impaled." This was not translated well, causing murmurs among the crowd. The elder raised a hand for silence. "The Khazar bond has not been formed in 7 generations. That it has been formed with an outsider, a skyfaller, is unprecedented." The elder's black eyes studied Marcus. "Some will see this as an omen, others as a defilement of sacred tradition." "I meant no disrespect," Marcus said. "Where I come from, catching spears is just self-preservation." This time the translation seemed more accurate, drawing what might have been laughter from some of the younger Neverends. The elder silenced them with a gesture. "Kira is our most honored warrior. First spear of the hunting circle. Her fate is now tied to yours, as yours is to hers." The elder turned to address the crowd. "The Khazar bond cannot be broken. It must be honored, even with an outsider." A younger elder stepped forward, scales flashing red with agitation. "But the skyships have awakened the Morvac. The outsiders have doomed us all." Shouts of agreement rose from the crowd. Marcus felt the mood shift dangerously against him. "My ship's crash was an accident," he said when the noise subsided. "But I represent the Galactic Alliance. We have technology that might help against these. Morvac, if you'll let me access my ship's emergency beacon, I can bring help." This caused an even greater commotion. Kira finally broke her silence, addressing the crowd in rapid Neverend. Whatever she said quieted them, though the tension remained palpable. The first elder nodded slowly. "Kira suggests we use your sky magic against the Morvac, but many fear it will only draw more of them. We will counsel on this matter." He gestured to Kira. "Take your Khazar bound to your dwelling. Guard him well. The council will decide by morning." As they left the gathering, Marcus whispered to Kira, "Thanks for the support back there." "I did not speak for you," she replied coldly. I spoke for my people. If your sky magic can stop the Morvek, then your usefulness outweighs the danger you bring. They arrived at a dwelling built into the side of the mountain, a spacious cavity that had been enhanced with the same organic crystalline architecture as the rest of the settlement. Inside, glowing plants provided soft illumination, revealing living areas and what appeared to be a sleeping chamber. "This is your home?" Marcus asked, suddenly aware of the implications of their bond. "Our home now," Kira corrected, though she didn't sound pleased about it. She removed her ornate armor, hanging each piece on a crystalline rack. Underneath, she wore a simple garment that revealed more of her copper skin and the intricate patterns of scales that covered her arms and shoulders. "About this bond," Marcus began cautiously. "I understand it's important to your people, but surely there's some way to, I don't know, annul it, under the circumstances." Kira's black eyes fixed on him. "You think I want to be bound to an alien? To have my fate tied to a skyfaller whose very presence has awakened our ancient enemy?" She approached, her movements fluid and predatory. "The bond is sacred, unbreakable. To suggest otherwise is to dishonor me before my tribe." Marcus raised his hands in surrender. "No dishonor intended. Just trying to understand the situation." Kira seemed to deflate slightly, sitting on a curved bench. "The situation is this. Your skyship crashed in the sacred valley where the Morvek sleep. The vibrations have awakened them for the first time in generations. Now they hunt, and they will not stop until they have consumed all in their path." "And what exactly are these Morvek?" "Ancient predators, larger than our hunting beasts, faster than our swiftest warriors. They hunt by sensing vibrations in the ground and can track prey for days." Kira's expression darkened. "Our ancestors fought them to the edge of extinction, driving the survivors into a deep sleep in the sacred valley. Now they are awake and hungry." Marcus processed this information. "My ship's defensive systems might still be operational. If we could recover them." "The Council may not allow it," Kira interrupted. "Many believe more sky magic will only make things worse. Then we need to convince them otherwise," Marcus said. "Because from what you're describing, you're going to need every advantage against these creatures." Before Kira could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the settlement, a resonant tone that set Marcus's teeth on edge. Kira was on her feet instantly, retrieving her armor and spear. "They are here," she said, her voice tight with controlled fear. "The Morvek have found us sooner than expected." Marcus followed her to the dwelling's entrance. In the fading light of dusk, he saw them, massive six-limbed creatures with elongated bodies covered in crystalline protrusions that reflected the settlement's lights. They moved with terrifying speed, scaling the valley walls and leaping between structures. The Never-End warriors had mobilized, forming defensive positions around the settlement's perimeter. Their spears, which Marcus now noticed glowed with some kind of energy, seemed woefully inadequate against the monstrous creatures. "Those spears," Marcus said, watching as one warrior's throw merely glanced off a Morvek's crystalline hide. "They're weapons, not just ceremonial." "Energy channelers," Kira confirmed, checking her own spear, which now hummed with power. "They disrupt the Morvek's crystalline structures, but we need direct hits at vulnerable points." Marcus thought quickly. "My multi-tool can scan for structural weaknesses, if we can identify where they're most vulnerable." A scream cut him off as a Morvek breached the perimeter, tearing through a group of warriors with horrifying ease. Another creature leaked onto a nearby platform, sending Neverends fleeing in terror. "We need to help them," Marcus said, drawing his sidearm. "No," Kira grabbed his arm. "If you die, I die. The Khazar bond ensures this. We must reach the weapons cache on the eastern ridge. I'm not going to hide while your people are slaughtered." Marcus pulled free, raising his sidearm as a Morvek turned toward them. The creature charged. Marcus fired 3 rapid shots, each hitting the Morvek's crystalline body. The energy pulses caused cracks to spread across its hide, slowing it momentarily, but not stopping it. Aim for the junction between head and body, Kira shouted, readying her spear. Marcus adjusted his aim and fired again. This time, the shot hit the precise spot Kira had indicated. The Morvek's crystalline structure shattered at the impact point, causing the creature to collapse in a heap of glittering fragments. Kira stared at the fallen Morvek, then at Marcus's weapon. Your sky magic is effective. Limited charge, Marcus warned, checking the sidearm's power level. But if we combine it with your knowledge of their weak points, we might stand a chance. For the first time, Kira looked at him with something other than resentment. Perhaps the Khazar bond was not merely fate's cruelty after all. She gestured toward the eastern ridge. Come, we need more weapons. As they fought their way across the settlement, Marcus witnessed the devastation the Morvak were causing. Buildings lay in ruins, and the bodies of fallen Neverans littered the ground. Yet the warriors fought bravely, their spears occasionally finding vulnerable points and bringing down the monstrous predators. At the weapons cache, a crystalline structure built into the mountainside, Kira distributed more spears to the warriors who had followed them. Marcus scanned the weapons with his multi-tool. The energy signature is similar to my sidearm, he observed. If I can calibrate it to match the precise frequency that disrupts their crystalline structure. Working quickly, Marcus modified his multi-tool to enhance the spear's energy output. When tested on a charging Morvak, the enhanced spear shattered the creature's entire front section, killing it instantly. Word spread quickly. Warriors brought their spears to Marcus for modification, and the tide of battle slowly began to turn. But for every Morvak they killed, more seemed to arrive, drawn by the vibrations of combat. We can't keep this up indefinitely, Marcus told Kira as they took a momentary respite. We need a more permanent solution. In the ancient texts, there is mention of a resonance chamber beneath the sacred valley, Kira said, her breathing heavy from exertion. Our ancestors used it to lull the Morvak into their long sleep. A sonic weapon, Marcus realized, using counter-frequencies to disrupt their crystalline structure on a massive scale. He checked his scanner. If I could get back to my ship, I might be able to modify the emergency beacon to emit the right frequency. Kira studied him for a moment, then made a decision. I will take you to your skyship, but we must move quickly and quietly. The Morvak are drawn to vibration, our heartbeats, our footsteps. As the battle raged around the settlement, Kira led Marcus through a hidden passage that wound beneath the valley floor. They emerged near the crashed scout ship, which lay half-buried in the crimson soil of the sacred valley. Keep low and move slowly, Kira instructed as they approached the ship. The Morvak will sense us eventually. Inside the damaged vessel, Marcus went straight to the emergency beacon. I need to reconfigure this to emit a wide-spectrum sonic pulse at precisely the right frequency. He worked feverishly, connecting his multi-tool to the beacon systems. If we can place it in this resonance chamber you mentioned, it might drive the Morvak back into hibernation. A low rumble outside the ship warned them they weren't alone. Kira peered through a breach in the hull. 3 Morvak circling. They sense us. Almost done, Marcus said, making the final adjustments. There, it's set to emit a continuous pulse at alternating frequencies. One of them should match what your ancestors used. We need to move now, Kira urged, readying her spear. The entrance to the resonance chamber is halfway across the valley. I'll draw them off, Marcus said, disconnecting the beacon. You take this to the chamber. Kira shook her head. The Khazar bond, remember. If you die, I die. We go together, or not at all. Their eyes met in understanding. Whether by alien custom or simple necessity, their fates were indeed intertwined. Together, then, Marcus agreed. They exited the ship to find themselves surrounded by Morvak, the creature's crystalline bodies glinting in the moonlight. Marcus raised his sidearm, Kira her spear, both knowing their chances were slim. Then, from the direction of the settlement, came a barrage of energy spears. The Neveran warriors had followed them, led by the Elder Council. The momentary distraction allowed Marcus and Kira to break through the circle of predators, running for the resonance chamber with the beacon clutched tightly in Marcus's hands. As they reached the ancient structure, a dome of crystalline material half buried in the valley floor, Marcus realized with growing dread that they had led the Morvac exactly where they needed to be. Dozens of the creatures now converged on the resonance chamber, drawn by the commotion. "We need to get this inside and activate it," Marcus shouted over the growing rumble of approaching Morvac. Kira nodded grimly. "And we need to survive long enough for it to work." The ancient enemy. The resonance chamber was unlike anything Marcus had seen, a perfect dome of crystalline material that seemed to capture and amplify sound. The walls were inscribed with ancient never-end symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. At the center stood a pedestal that appeared designed specifically to house some kind of device. "This is it," Kira confirmed, her voice echoing strangely in the chamber. "The ancient texts speak of a singing stone placed here to lull the Morvac into slumber." Marcus placed the modified emergency beacon on the pedestal. "Let's hope this modern version works just as well." He activated the device, which began emitting a low hum that gradually increased in intensity. The chamber's walls seemed to respond, glowing brighter with each change in frequency. "How long will it take?" Kira asked, keeping her spear ready as shadows moved outside the chamber's entrance. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "Minutes? Hours? The beacon is cycling through frequencies until it finds the resonance that affects the Morvac." A crash from the entrance cut their conversation short. The first of the Morvac had arrived, its crystalline body barely fitting through the doorway. Behind it, more of the creatures pressed forward, drawn by the beacon's pulsing signal. "We need to hold them off until the beacon finds the right frequency," Marcus said, raising his sidearm, which was now dangerously low on charge. Kira nodded, moving to stand beside him, her spear leveled at the approaching predator. "Then we fight. Together." The next minutes were a blur of desperate combat. Marcus and Kira moved as one, covering each other's vulnerabilities, striking at the weak points in the Morvac's crystalline armor. The chamber's unusual acoustics seemed to confuse the creatures, making their movements less coordinated, but there were simply too many of them. Marcus's sidearm finally died after bringing down a particularly large Morvac. He switched to using a broken spear shaft as a makeshift weapon, driving it into the junction points Kira had taught him to target. His shoulder wound had reopened, and blood soaked through his flight suit, but adrenaline kept him moving. Kira fought with the grace and precision that marked her as first spear of the hunting circle. Her every movement was calculated for maximum effect, her spear finding vulnerable points with unerring accuracy. Yet even she was tiring, her copper skin dulled with exertion, a gash across her scaled forearm, leaking dark fluid. "The beacon's not working fast enough," Marcus gasped as they momentarily pushed the Morvac back from the chamber's entrance. "We need to amplify it somehow." Kira glanced at the glowing symbols on the chamber walls. The ancients used their voices, a specific chant that resonated with the singing stone. "You know this chant." "Only fragments passed down through the generations." She looked uncertain for the first time since Marcus had met her. "I am a warrior, not a keeper of songs." A roar from outside warned them that more Morvac were approaching. Marcus made a quick decision. "Try the fragments you know. I'll hold them off as long as I can." Kira nodded, moving to the center of the chamber where the beacon hummed. She began a low, melodic chant in the Neveran language, her voice rising and falling in patterns that seemed to match the pulsing of the beacon. The effect was immediate. The chamber's crystals resonated with her voice, amplifying it and sending pulses of energy through the structure. The Morvac at the entrance hesitated, their movements becoming erratic. Marcus seized the opportunity, using his makeshift weapon to drive them back further. "It's working. Keep singing." Kira's voice grew stronger, more confident. The beacon's frequency shifted to match her chant, creating a harmonious resonance that filled the chamber with sound and light. The walls pulsed in rhythm with the combined energies, sending waves of disruptive force outward. The Morvac began to retreat, their crystalline bodies vibrating in obvious distress. Some of the smaller ones actually shattered, unable to withstand the resonant frequency. Others backed away, seeking escape from the painful sound. Marcus fought his way back to Kira's side, watching in amazement as the resonance chamber performed its ancient function. "You did it." But Kira was struggling, her voice faltering as she tried to maintain the complex patterns of the chant. "I cannot. Remember, all." The resonance began to weaken. Immediately, the Morvac rallied, pressing forward once more. Marcus looked at the beacon, then at Kira, an idea forming. "The Khazar bond. You said it allows bound pairs to share thoughts, feelings." Kira nodded, still trying to maintain the chant. "Then share the pattern with me," Marcus said, placing his hand on the beacon next to hers. "Let me help you complete the song." Their eyes met, human blue and never-end black. And for a moment, Marcus felt something impossible, a connection that transcended their biological differences. Through it flowed the ancient patterns of the never-end chant, incomplete but recognizable. Without knowing how he knew, Marcus began to sing, his voice joining Kira's in perfect harmony. The missing portions of the chant flowed from him as if he had known them all his life, the alien syllables feeling natural on his tongue. Together, their voices created the complete resonance pattern. The chamber responded with overwhelming force, energy pulsing outward in expanding waves. The Morvac scattered before it, their predatory instincts overcome by pain and confusion. Outside the chamber, the Never-End warriors watched in awe as the Morvac flowed into the night, returning to the depths of the sacred valley. The resonance continued to build, guiding them back to their ancient hibernation grounds, lulling them once more into their centuries-long slumber. In the chamber, Marcus and Kira maintained the chant until they were certain the creatures were gone. When finally they stopped, the silence was profound. "How did you know?" Kira asked, her voice hoarse from singing. "How did you complete the ancient chant?" Marcus shook his head, equally bewildered. "I didn't, but somehow. I felt it through you." He looked at their hands, still touching on the beacon. "The Khazar bond is real, isn't it?" Before Kira could answer, the Never-End elders entered the chamber, led by the pale-scaled leader who had addressed them earlier. His black eyes moved from the still humming beacon to Marcus and Kira. "The ancient texts speak truth," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "The Khazar bond transcends blood and world. You have shared the sacred song across the void between your kinds." The other Neverends who had gathered at the entrance bowed their heads in respect, not just to Kira now, but to Marcus as well. "The Morvac have returned to their slumber," the elder continued. "Thanks to the Skyfaller and First Spear, this day will be remembered in our songs for generations to come." Kira straightened, assuming her formal posture despite her exhaustion and injuries. The Skyfaller's magic made this possible. Without it, many more would have died. The elder nodded solemnly. "Perhaps it was not chance that brought him to our world, nor chance that he caught your spear." He gestured to the other elders. "Come, there is much to discuss. The bond between worlds opens new paths for our people." As they left the resonance chamber, Marcus felt the full weight of his exhaustion. The adrenaline that had kept him going was fading, and his injuries demanded attention. Yet he also felt a strange sense of accomplishment, perhaps even belonging, that he hadn't expected to find on this alien world. Kira walked beside him, her usual rigid posture softened by fatigue. "You fought well," she said, which Marcus suspected was high praise coming from her. "For a Skyfaller." "You weren't so bad yourself," he replied with a tired smile. "For someone who got stuck with an alien husband." To his surprise, the translator rendered what might have been a laugh, a short, clicking sound that he found oddly appealing. "The Khazar bond is not husband," she corrected, though with less irritation than before. "It is more complex." "So I'm learning," Marcus said as they followed the elders back toward the settlement. "Along with a lot of other things about your world." Kira glanced at him, her black eyes reflecting the starlight. And I, perhaps about yours. At the settlement, they were greeted as heroes. The Neverans had already begun repairing the damage from the Morvac attack, their resilience impressive. Marcus found himself the center of curious attention, especially from the younger Neverans, who had never seen an outsider before. The Elder Council summoned them to a formal gathering once their injuries had been treated. There, before the assembled tribe, the pale-scaled elder made a proclamation. "The council has decided," he announced. "The Skyfaller Marcus Stone is recognized as Khazar-bound to first spear Kira. He is welcome among the Neverend people for as long as he wishes to stay." Murmurs of approval spread through the gathering, a stark contrast to the suspicion Marcus had faced upon arrival. Furthermore, the elder continued, "We will assist in repairing his skyship, that he may contact his people. The time of isolation is ending. The stars have brought us a new beginning." Later, as they returned to Kira's their dwelling, Marcus reminded himself. He processed the council's decision. "Your people are taking this remarkably well," he observed. "From fear of outsiders to embracing contact with the galaxy in a single day. The Khazar bond is seen as fate's hand," Kira explained, arranging fresh healing herbs on his shoulder wound. "If the ancient powers bound us together, who are we to question? Besides, your sky magic proved its worth against the Morvac. About that,